The first lie wasn't the wedding invitation, it was my daughter's smile. I've known Emily for 27 years, and I've always been able to tell when something was wrong. Ever since she was a little girl, she'd smile with her lips, but her eyes always told the truth. 2 months before her wedding, she walked into my kitchen carrying invitation samples and wrapped me in a hug that lasted just a little too long. "Dad," she said softly, "I need you to promise me something." I smiled. "That depends. Am I about to wear one of those embarrassing matching ties?" She forced a laugh, then looked away. "Promise me you won't try to meet Ryan's parents." Her words caught me completely off guard. "What do you mean? They won't be coming to the wedding." "Why not? They live overseas." "Where?" She hesitated. Europe's a big place. Emily, they travel constantly. They're very private people." I frowned. "They can't make time for their only son's wedding." Her fingers tightened around the invitations. "They just can't." Before I could ask another question, she quickly gathered the papers. "I have to meet Ryan. We'll talk later." A few seconds later, the front door closed, leaving me standing alone in the silent kitchen. For nearly a year, I'd known Ryan as a polite, successful young man who treated my daughter with kindness. Yet there was one thing that had always seemed strange. I'd never heard him talk about his parents, not once. No childhood stories, no family photographs, no holiday memories, nothing. At first, I assumed they simply weren't close. But Emily's nervous reaction told me something different. She wasn't just asking me to respect Ryan's privacy. She was desperate to stop me from asking questions. As I looked at the wedding invitations scattered across the table, one thought refused to leave my mind. Why would a bride be so terrified of her own father meeting the family she was about to marry into? Over the next few weeks, wedding planning took over our lives. Emily seemed happier than ever. We toured venues, sampled cakes, argued over flower arrangements, and laughed about guest lists. Watching her plan the happiest day of her life should have filled me with excitement. Instead, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. Ryan's family. Every meeting ended with the same question. "So, when will the groom's parents arrive?" Ryan always answered before Emily could. "They won't." His smile never changed. "We're not close." At first, no one questioned it. Families fall apart. Relationships end. It happens. But the closer the wedding came, the stranger it became. There were no parents, no brothers or sisters, no grandparents, no cousins, not a single relative on Ryan's side of the guest list. One evening, while we were finalizing the seating chart, I noticed Emily's side filled nearly 3 pages. Ryan's side barely filled half of one. Mostly co-workers, a few college friends, no family, trying to keep the mood light. I smiled at Ryan. "So, were you the troublemaker growing up?" He froze for just a second before forcing a laugh. "I don't really like talking about my childhood." Before I could respond, Emily quickly interrupted. "Dad, can you pass me those invitations?" The conversation ended as quickly as it had begun. A few days later, it happened again, while tasting wedding cakes. The baker jokingly asked Ryan what kind of birthday cakes he loved as a kid. Ryan hesitated. "I honestly don't remember," Emily answered before anyone else could speak. "He didn't have the happiest childhood." The room fell silent. Nobody asked another question. Driving home that evening, I replayed every conversation. In my head, it wasn't just that Ryan avoided talking about his family. It was how perfectly he avoided it. Every question about his past ended the same way. Emily would step in. Ryan would smile. The subject would change. Then came the moment that finally convinced me something was terribly wrong. Emily dropped off a box of wedding invitations for me to mail. As I sorted through them, I noticed something that made my stomach tighten. Not a single invitation was addressed to anyone with Ryan's last name. Not one. I looked at. "Emily, are you sure there isn't anyone from Ryan's family who should be invited?" She stared at the box for several seconds before quietly taking it from my hands. Then, with tears beginning to fill her eyes, she whispered, "Dad, please, just let this go." That wasn't the voice of a bride protecting her fiancé's privacy. It was the voice of someone terrified that one more question would uncover a truth she was desperately trying to keep hidden for days. I tried convincing myself I was imagining things. Maybe Ryan really had a painful childhood. Maybe his parents had abandoned him. Maybe Emily was simply protecting the man she loved. But every time I remembered her pleading voice, "Dad, please don't try to meet Ryan's parents," my instincts told me something wasn't right. After 3 sleepless nights, I hired a private investigator. His name was Mark Sullivan, a retired detective with decades of experience. When we met, I slid Ryan's photograph across the table. "I don't want rumors," I told him. "I only want the truth." 3 days later, Mark called. His voice sounded unusually serious. "You should come to my office." The moment I arrived, he placed a thin folder on his desk. "I found Ryan's parents." I leaned forward. "They're overseas." Mark slowly shook his head. "No." He handed me a printed address. "They've lived here for almost 15 years. I stared at the paper in disbelief. The address wasn't in another country. It wasn't even in another state. It was only 3 hours from my home. My stomach tightened. "Are you sure?" I verified it through property records, public records, and utility accounts. he replied. They've never moved. Then why would Ryan tell everyone they live overseas? Mark hesitated. I don't know. He paused before adding, but I spoke to one of their neighbors. What did they say? They told me one thing. It's better if you hear the truth from Ryan's parents. The next morning, I started the 3-hour drive. The entire journey, I imagined what I would find. Ryan drove a luxury car, wore expensive suits, and ran a successful business. Thought I expected a large estate. Instead, my GPS led me into a quiet suburban neighborhood filled with modest homes, children riding bicycles, and neighbors watering their gardens. I checked the address twice. It was correct. A small brick house stood before me, with white shutters, 2 old rocking chairs on the porch, and a neatly trimmed garden. Nothing about it looked unusual. Taking a deep breath, I walked to the front door and rang the bell a few moments later. An elderly woman opened it. She smiled politely. Can I help you? My throat suddenly felt dry. My name is Daniel Carter. She nodded. I'm Emily's father. The moment she heard my daughter's name, her smile vanished. Tears filled her eyes. Her hand trembled against the doorframe as she struggled to speak. Finally, she whispered through quiet sobs, I've been praying someone from your family would come. In that instant, I realized I hadn't just found Ryan's parents. I had found the people who had been waiting years for someone to uncover the truth. The elderly woman stepped aside, still wiping tears from her eyes. Please, come in. The house was simple but welcoming. Family photographs covered the walls. A grandfather clock ticked quietly in the corner, and the smell of fresh coffee filled the room. Nothing about it resembled the cold, abusive home Ryan had described. A few moments later, an older man entered the room. Margaret looked at him with tearful eyes. Thomas, he's Emily's father. The man's shoulders dropped as if he'd been carrying a burden for years. So, he whispered, it's finally happening. After we sat down, Thomas looked at me. I suppose Ryan told you we were terrible parents. I hesitated before answering. He said you were no longer part of his life. Thomas gave a sad smile. That's true, but not for the reason he told you. Margaret reached for an old photo album and placed it on the table. The first pages showed a smiling little boy celebrating birthdays, family vacations, and Christmas mornings. That was Ryan, she said softly. He wasn't born this way. As the pages turned, the smiles slowly disappeared. Thomas sighed. It started with small lies, skipping school, stealing money from my wallet, blaming other people. We believed he'd grow out of it, Margaret added, but he never did. Thomas lowered his head. When Ryan was 20, he forged my signature and emptied almost our entire savings account. I stared at him in disbelief. You called the police. We had no choice, Thomas replied. We gave him chance after chance, but every promise he made was another lie. Margaret opened a wooden box filled with old letters. He always apologized. She handed me one. I'm sorry, I'll change. I promise this is the last time. There were dozens of letters, she whispered. Everyone sounded sincere. None of them were, Thomas continued. He borrowed money from relatives and never repaid them. He manipulated elderly family members into signing documents they didn't understand. Then he convinced his younger brother to invest everything in a business. What happened? I asked. Thomas closed his eyes. Ryan secretly transferred the company's money into his own accounts. The business collapsed, and my youngest son lost everything. I couldn't reconcile those stories with the polite, respectful man who was about to marry my daughter. The Ryan I know is incapable of that. Margaret looked at me with heartbreaking sympathy. He always seems kind, until he gets what he wants. She stood, unlocked a small cabinet, and returned with a thick brown folder. You don't have to believe us, she said quietly. Believe the evidence. Inside were police reports, bank records, forged signatures, court documents, and legal notices dating back years. Every document carried Ryan's name. Every page confirmed another betrayal. My hands began to shake as I turned the final page. There was simply too much evidence to ignore. The man I'd welcomed into my family suddenly felt like a complete stranger, and for the first time, I wasn't asking whether Ryan had lied. I was asking myself how much of his entire life had been nothing more than a carefully planned deception. I drove home in complete silence. The folder Margaret had given me rested on the passenger seat, but it felt heavier than any weight I'd ever carried. Every document pointed to the same conclusion. Yet I still hoped there was some explanation I hadn't seen. The next evening, I asked Emily to come over for dinner. I didn't invite Ryan. I needed to talk to my daughter alone for a little while. Everything felt normal. We talked about flowers, honeymoon plans, and the music she'd chosen for the ceremony. Looking at her smile, I almost convinced myself to stay quiet, but I couldn't. Finally, I took a deep breath. Emily, I met Ryan's parents. Her smile disappeared instantly. You are. They told me the truth. Before I could explain, she pushed her chair back. No, Dad, you weren't supposed to go. I froze. What do you mean? She lowered her eyes. Ryan warned me you might find them someday. My heart sank. He said his parents would lie about him. He said they're mentally unstable and have spent years trying to ruin his life. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. They showed me police reports, court records, and bank documents. Emily, this isn't gossip. She shook her head. They forged everything. I reached across the table. Please, don't marry him until we verify the facts. To delay the wedding for a few weeks. That's all I'm asking. Tears filled her eyes. You've never trusted him. That's not true. Then why can't you let me be happy? I'm trying to protect you. No, she whispered. You're trying to control my life. The words cut deeper than anything she'd ever said. For 27 years, she'd trusted me completely. Now she looked at me like I was the enemy. She picked up her purse and walked toward the door. Before leaving, she turned around. If you love me, she paused. Stay out of my life. The door closed behind her, and for the first time, I truly believed I had lost my daughter. Days passed without a single phone call. Emily ignored every message I sent. I began wondering if I should simply give up. Then my phone rang. It was Mark. I found something worse, he said. 30 minutes later, I was sitting across from him in his office. He slid another folder toward me. Ryan's past is only half the story. Inside were recent financial documents signed by Emily. Joint bank account, forms. Insurance updates, investment authorizations. Then I reached the final page. It was paperwork recommending the sale of the house Emily had inherited from her late mother immediately after the wedding, projected profits, transfer, instructions. Everything had already been prepared. Mark looked at me gravely. Ryan didn't start planning for the marriage. He pointed at the documents. He started planning for her money. In that moment, every piece of the puzzle finally came together. Ryan wasn't building a future with my daughter. He was quietly preparing to take everything she owned. The wedding was only 4 days away. Every morning, I called Emily every morning. The call went to voicemail. I left messages begging her to slow down, to look at the evidence, to give me just 1 hour to explain everything. She never replied. Instead, Ryan worked even harder to isolate her from me soon. Relatives began calling not to ask what I'd discovered, but to ask why I was trying to ruin my daughter's wedding. Ryan had already told everyone his version of the story. According to him, I couldn't accept that Emily was growing up. I was controlling, overprotective, and desperate to break them apart. People believed him. Friends who had known me for years suddenly avoided my calls. Even Emily's closest friends defended Ryan, saying he had been nothing but patient and respectful. One afternoon, Sarah, Emily's childhood best friend, came to my house. For a moment, I thought she'd come to listen. Instead, she looked at me with disappointment. Mr. Carter, she said gently, please stop. Emily loves him. You're only pushing her away. I wanted to hand her every document, every bank record, every police report, but I knew it wouldn't matter. Ryan had already planted the seeds of doubt to everyone else. I looked like a father refusing to let go of his daughter. That evening, I sat alone in my living room, staring at the folders spread across the table. The evidence was overwhelming, yet evidence means nothing when no one is willing to see it for the first time. I wondered if I'd already lost. Then one thought changed everything. There were only 2 people who knew the real Ryan before he learned how to fool the world. His parents. The next morning, I drove back to the small brick house. Margaret opened the door before I could knock. One look at my face, and she understood. Emily doesn't believe you, she said quietly. I shook my head. No. Thomas joined us in the living room. After a long silence, I looked at both of them. The wedding is in 2 days. I've tried everything. If I fail now, my daughter will lose everything. Taking a deep breath, I asked the only question I had left. Will you stand beside me? Margaret looked at her husband. He slowly nodded with tears in her eyes. She reached for my hand. We should have stopped him years ago, she whispered. This time, we'll tell the truth together. The morning of the wedding arrived with clear blue skies. It should have been the happiest day of Emily's life. White roses lined the aisle of St. Andrew's Church. Soft music echoed through the sanctuary as guests filled the pews, smiling and chatting about the beautiful couple. Everyone believed they were about to witness the perfect beginning. Everyone except me. I sat quietly in the last row, holding a leather folder containing every piece of evidence I'd gathered over the past few weeks. Ryan spotted me as soon as I entered. He smiled confidently, a smile of a man who believed he'd already won. Then the church doors opened. Emily stepped inside, wearing a beautiful white dress. She looked happier than I'd seen her in months. For a brief moment, I almost stood up and walked away. I didn't want to destroy her wedding, but I knew staying silent would destroy her future. As she reached the altar, the officiant welcomed everyone before beginning the ceremony. He spoke about love, trust, honesty. Each word felt painfully ironic. Finally, he looked around the room. If anyone knows of any lawful reason why these two should not be joined in marriage, speak now or forever hold your peace. The church fell silent. My heart pounded. Slowly, I stood. Every guest turned toward me. Emily's smile disappeared. Ryan simply sighed, as though he had expected this all along. Took a step into the aisle. I don't object because I dislike this man. My voice echoed through the church. I object because the man standing before you has built his life on lies. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Ryan smiled. Calmly, I'm sorry everyone, he said. Emily and I knew this might happen. Daniel has had a hard time accepting that his little girl is getting married. Several guests nodded sympathetically, exactly as Ryan had planned. Without saying another word, I walked to the projector near the altar and connected my laptop. The screen behind the altar came to life. The first image appeared. A police report. Then a bank statement. Court records. Forged signatures. Financial transfers. Property documents. One. A piece of evidence after another filled the screen. The whispers stopped. The room became completely silent. Ryan's smile slowly faded. I faced the guests. Every document has been verified. Every record comes from official sources. I wanted these accusations to be false, but they aren't. Emily looked at the screen, then back at Ryan. Her hands began to shake. Ryan stepped forward. They're fake. He pointed at me. He's manipulating all of you. Before anyone could react, large wooden doors at the back of the church slowly opened. Margaret and Thomas Bennett walked inside. Ryan's face turned white. No, he whispered. Margaret stopped beside Emily, tears streaming down her face. I'm so sorry, she said softly. My son has lied too. You. Thomas stepped forward. We're Ryan's parents. We spent years protecting him because we believed he would change. He looked at his son with heartbreaking disappointment. With every chance we gave him, became another opportunity to hurt someone else. Margaret handed another folder to the officiant. These are the letters Ryan wrote after every lie, every theft, and every broken promise. He always apologized, and then found another victim. Emily slowly turned toward Ryan. Tell me they're lying. Ryan didn't answer. Instead, his calm expression disappeared, his face twisted with anger. This is all your fault, he shouted at me. He rushed toward the projector, trying to tear the cables from the floor. Papers scattered across the aisle as he grabbed the evidence, shouting that everyone was trying to destroy him. The church gasped. The polite, charming man everyone admired was gone. For the first time, they saw the real Ryan. At that moment, two police officers entered the church. One stepped forward. Ryan Bennett, you are under arrest on charges related to fraud, forgery, and financial crimes. Ryan backed away in panic. You can't arrest me here. The officers calmly placed him in handcuffs. As they led him away, he looked desperately at Emily. Please, I did all of this for us. Emily silently removed her engagement ring. She looked into his eyes one last time, then she placed the ring on the floor between them. Without saying a word, she turned and walked toward me. Tears filled her eyes as she whispered, Dad, you were right. In that moment, I knew I hadn't destroyed my daughter's wedding. I had saved her life. The church remained silent long after the police had taken Ryan away. One by one, the guests quietly left, leaving behind the flowers, the music, and the celebration that would never happen. Emily stood alone at the altar. She stared at the engagement ring lying on the floor where she had dropped it. Then she turned away and walked out of the church without looking back. Wanted to run after her. I wanted to tell her everything would be okay, but some wounds need silence before they can heal. The weeks that followed were difficult. Emily cancelled the honeymoon, returned the wedding gifts, and worked with lawyers to cancel every financial document Ryan had convinced her to sign. Thankfully, because the marriage never took place, her mother's house, savings, and investments were protected before it was too late. 6 weeks later, I was watering the flowers in my backyard when I heard the gate open. Emily stood there quietly. She looked tired, but for the first time in months, the fear in her eyes was gone. She slowly walked toward me. I'm sorry, Dad. Only 3 words, but they carried the weight of everything we had been through. Without saying anything, I hugged her. She broke down in tears. I thought you were trying to control my life, she whispered, gently smiled. I wasn't trying to control your future. I was trying to protect it. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Months later, Emily began rebuilding her life. She kept her mother's house, returned to work, and slowly learned to trust again. Not long after, Margaret and Thomas visited us, with tears in their eyes. They thanked me for having the courage to do what they couldn't. Looking back, I realized something important. Sometimes, loving someone means risking them hating you, because real love doesn't always protect feelings, it protects futures. That day, I didn't lose a son-in-law. I got my daughter back, and that was worth everything. I had no idea that finding the answer would force me to make the hardest decision of my life, stopping my own daughter's wedding.